The autumn leaves crunched under my feet as I stood frozen behind my mother's kitchen window. My son Tyler's small hand gripping mine so tightly it hurt. He was only 11, still a boy, and yet in that moment, I knew he could sense the storm breaking inside me. His wide, confused eyes kept darting up at me, searching for answers I wasn't ready to give. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out everything until the sound of two voices cut through the glass and shattered the world I thought I knew. "She's so broken, Helen. Always crying, always needy. I can't take it anymore." It was Brandon. My husband. The man I had loved, trusted, built a life with. His voice was calm, even casual, as though he were discussing a minor inconvenience, not my entire existence. And then came the sound that sliced through my soul deeper than any blade, my mother's laugh. Cold, sharp, cruel. "I told you not to marry her, didn't I? Always said she was too weak for a man like you, too damaged." Her words stabbed into me like knives, each one twisting old scars I thought I had buried. My legs nearly gave out, but I gripped the windowsill until my knuckles turned white. I felt Tyler's tiny fingers squeezing harder, as though his little body knew his mother was unraveling before his eyes. I wanted to run, to scream, to burst inside and demand answers. But I stayed there, pressed against the glass, suffocating under the weight of betrayal. My husband and my mother. The two people who were supposed to love me most in this world. The insurance money from her father's death made it worth it for a while. Brandon continued, his tone disturbingly indifferent. "But now that's almost gone. I'm done playing the caring husband to someone so pathetic." I almost fell to my knees right there in the dirt. The insurance money. The money I had believed was sacred, tucked away for Tyler's future, for his college, for his dreams. My father's final gift to us after the accident that had stolen him from me 3 years earlier. I had clung to that security like a lifeline, never suspecting it was the very reason Brandon had held me close all these years. "What are you going to do about it?" my mother asked, her voice dripping with a vile excitement that made my stomach twist. "I'm going to leave her. Take everything. She's so weak and broken she won't even fight me. She'll just cry and accept it like she always does." They laughed. They actually laughed. At my pain, my weakness, my foolishness. And in that moment, something inside me broke. But not in the way they thought. It wasn't the kind of breaking that leaves you in pieces. It was the kind that reshapes you entirely. The woman I had been grateful, submissive, desperate for approval died right there behind that window. And from her ashes, someone else began to rise. Someone cold, calculating, no longer afraid to fight. I pulled Tyler back from the window before he could hear more, before he could carry the full burden of what I had just witnessed. My voice was steady even though my insides felt like glass shards cutting me apart. "Come on, sweetheart, let's go." We walked to the car in silence. Tyler looked at me, concern etched across his young face. "Mom, are you okay? You look pale." I forced a smile, though it hurt. "I'm fine, baby. We're going home." But I wasn't fine, and I wasn't going home to the same life. I drove away from that house with my son in the back seat, my mind already spinning. They thought I was weak. They thought I would crumble. They thought I would lie down and accept whatever scraps of love they decided to leave me. They were about to find out how wrong they were. That night, after tucking Tyler into bed, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror for the first time in years, and really looked at myself. 32 years old with tired eyes and a face that carried too many years of pain. My hair was pulled back in the same plain ponytail I had worn for a decade. No makeup, no spark. Just a woman who had made herself small to survive. A woman who had believed that being tolerated was the same as being loved. But behind those weary eyes, something new flickered, something fierce. When Brandon came home later, kissing my cheek and murmuring his usual lies about a long day at work, I let him. I even smiled, pretending not to notice the faint scent of my mother's perfume clinging to his shirt. But inside, I was no longer the same. Inside, I was already planning. He thought he knew me. He thought I would never fight back. He thought I would remain the fragile little doll they could both manipulate forever. But he was about to meet a version of me he had never imagined. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark, listening to Brandon breathe, counting the seconds between each rise and fall of his chest, the way I used to count contractions with Tyler, waiting for a life to arrive. This time I was waiting for a life to end or maybe to begin. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard their laughter again. My mother's bright and brittle, Brandon's low and cruel. The sound lived behind my ribs like a second heartbeat. At 3 in the morning, I slipped out of bed and sat on the bathroom floor with my back against the tub until the tiles stole the warmth from my skin and left me clear-headed. By sunrise, I had a plan, or at least the bones of one. I made Tyler pancakes the way he liked them, too many chocolate chips, just enough to make him laugh and kiss the top of his head when he said the word perfect. I kept my voice light as I told him Aunt Mia would take him to the movies after school. He beamed. He didn't see the tremor in my hands when I packed his lunch. Children never should have to. After drop-off, I drove to the bank. The lobby smelled like lemon polish and false comfort. I asked for statements from every account with my name on it, checking savings, the college fund we'd opened when Tyler lost his first tooth, and Brandon swore he'd match my deposits every month, babe. I smiled at the teller like any ordinary mother doing ordinary bookkeeping. Inside, I was bracing for a car crash I could see happening in slow motion. When the papers slid across the counter, my stomach pitched. Line after line confirmed what the voices through the glass had promised: transfers to an account I didn't recognize just under the daily threshold that triggers alerts. Regular methodical withdrawals from the college fund labeled rebalancing, each coinciding with a day I'd been too sick with grief for my father to notice numbers. And there my mother's full name in a memo, once sloppy and careless, like a signature on stolen property. I didn't cry. The tears had burned themselves out in other seasons. I thanked the teller and drove to a different branch across town and rented a safe deposit box in my name only. I put the statements inside. Then I went home and gathered every document I owned: marriage certificate, Tyler's birth certificate, my father's insurance policy, the will he'd written in his gentle looping script. I copied everything. Originals went into the box. Copies went where Brandon could find them if he started hunting harmless paper distractions to keep him busy while I moved the real pieces. At noon, I texted Mia, "Can you meet me? No questions if you can't." Her reply came fast. "Corner of 5th and Pine, 30 minutes. I'll ask 100 questions, but I'll still come." The cafe was loud enough to swallow a confession. I sat across from her and told her everything but the parts that would break her: the scent on his shirt, the way my mother had laughed. Mia's brown eyes went hard and bright the way they did in high school when someone lied about me. She reached across the table and took my hand. "We're going to make a list," she said. "And then we're going to make a lawyer." We made the list on a napkin: bank statements, credit reports, passwords I could change without raising suspicion. The cloud backup. Brandon thought I was too technologically shy to understand. Mia texted a family attorney she trusted, from a messy divorce she had survived with her humor intact. An hour later, I was in a quiet office with framed law degrees and a plant that looked too real to be fake and too glossy to be real. The attorney's name was Laura. She had steady hands and a way of asking questions that felt like she was opening doors instead of prying them off hinges. I told her about the window, the voices, the money. I slid the copies across her desk and watched the pulse jump once in her throat. "You did the right thing," she said. "We move quietly. We gather. We protect your son. Do not confront either of them. Not yet." "Not ever," I heard myself say. "Not if I can help it." She showed me how to pull my credit report and place a fraud alert. She taught me the phrase financial restraining order and the shape of a custody petition. She said words like marital waste and dissipation, and they felt like clean knives in my palm tools, not threats. When I stood to leave, she pressed 2 cards into my hand, one for a therapist who specialized in betrayal trauma, and one for a locksmith who could rekey a life in an afternoon. "You're not weak," she said. "You're wounded. That's different. Wounds heal when you stop letting the knife back in." That night I started small. I changed the recovery emails on my accounts to a new address only I knew. I set up 2-factor authentication and hid the backup codes in Tyler's old Lego box. No one would ever look under a castle with a missing turret. I put a passcode on my laptop and taught Tyler that if anyone asked for it, even Grandma, he should say he didn't know. Then I told him a story about secrets that keep people safe. He nodded solemnly like a little soldier and asked if he could sleep with the dog. I said yes, without asking why. Brandon came home late, annoyed I hadn't answered his earlier texts about dinner. He kissed my cheek and asked why the house smelled like lemon polish. I cleaned, I said. It was true. I had wiped down the mantel and the picture frames and the life we'd posed for. He didn't notice the thick manila envelope tucked inside my tote, heavy with more copies. He didn't notice I'd moved my grandmother's locket from the jewelry box to the pocket of my jeans. He didn't notice me at all. When he went to shower, I set a small voice recorder on the bookshelf beside the hallway. It was legal in our state to record conversations you were part of. Laura had made me repeat that twice. I pressed the button and heard the faint hiss that sounded like breath. My heart galloped. This was the part of a dream where you realize you're running and the ground could open or hold. He came back smelling like my soap. In the kitchen, he complained about work, about traffic, about the price of gas, the usual chorus. Then, like a weather change, his voice shifted and he said the thing I needed him to say. I can't keep pretending with her, Helen. After the holidays, we do it. I'll have access to everything by then. He'd pocket-dialed my mother. Or she'd called him. I don't know. What I know is that her voice spilled through the tiny speaker of his phone, a whisper I recognize like a scar. Don't get sloppy, Brandon. She's fragile, but even fragile things cut when they break. I stared at the recorder on the shelf as their words wove the rope they intended for me. I locked my face into the shape he expected and nodded at the correct beats. Inside, I catalogued time, date, tone. When he finally slept, I tiptoed into the hall and lifted the recorder like a relic. The minutes of audio felt warm in my palm, proof. It wasn't everything, but it was enough to steady me. I lay awake until the gray hour before dawn, counting breaths again, but this time I counted my own. One for Tyler, one for the girl I used to be, one for the woman I was becoming, the one who would take the pieces they had shattered and arrange them into a weapon or a window. Morning light streamed through the blinds, thin and golden, but it couldn't warm the chill that had taken root in my bones. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of Brandon moving in the kitchen. The clatter of dishes, the scrape of a chair, ordinary sounds that felt sinister now that I knew what he was capable of. I turned my head and saw Tyler still sleeping, his face peaceful, unaware of the storm swirling around us. I wanted so desperately to keep it that way. I slipped out of bed and padded softly down the hallway. Brandon was sipping coffee, scrolling through his phone like it was any other morning. When he glanced up and smiled, I forced my lips to curve into something resembling a smile back. But inside I was screaming. His every gesture felt like a lie, every word he might speak another blade hidden in honey. "Morning, babe," he said casually, as if he hadn't whispered plans with my mother the night before. "You okay? You look tired." "I didn't sleep much," I answered truthfully. He nodded without pressing. He never pressed. He thought he already knew everything about me, that I was simple, predictable, fragile. But soon he'd see how wrong he was. After he left for work, I dug the recorder out from my hiding spot. My hands shook as I replayed their voices, his deep, steady tone, her sharp whisper. Together they had written my death sentence, or at least the death of the woman I once was. But to me, this wasn't just pain anymore. It was ammunition. I sent the file to a secure drive and then to Laura the lawyer with a short message. "We have proof." Within minutes she replied, "Good. Start documenting everything: times, dates, bank records, interactions. Build the wall brick by brick. We'll make it unbreakable." Her confidence steadied me. For the first time since that day at my mother's window, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like someone sharpening her claws. That evening when Brandon came home, I tried something new. I asked him about his day, listened as he droned on about work politics, nodded when he complained about traffic. I even laughed at one of his recycled jokes. He didn't notice the stiffness in my smile or the way my hands trembled beneath the table. He didn't see the recorder hidden in the fruit bowl, catching every word. Later, after Tyler was asleep, Brandon leaned against the doorframe of our bedroom and looked at me with that familiar smirk. "You know," he said, his voice smooth, "Mom was asking about Thanksgiving. Maybe we should go over to her place this year." My chest tightened, but I didn't let it show. "Sure," I said, my voice even. "Whatever you want." Inside, though, fire roared. He had the audacity to suggest a family holiday with the very woman who had plotted my undoing. But maybe that was good. Maybe his arrogance was the key to his downfall. If he thought I was still blind, I could lead him right into the trap of his own making. The days turned into a pattern, gathering evidence, playing the obedient wife, protecting Tyler from the darkness simmering just beneath our roof. Each smile I gave Brandon was a blade I sharpened behind my back. Each dinner we shared was another log added to the fire I was building. One night, while folding laundry, I found a receipt tucked into his jeans pocket. A jewelry store, a diamond necklace. Not for me. My stomach clenched, bile rising in my throat. For her. For my mother. My own mother. I snapped a photo, then placed the receipt back exactly where I found it. Proof upon proof, stone upon stone, until the wall I was building towered high enough to block out their lies. Still, there were moments when the weight threatened to crush me. Moments when I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at Tyler's sleeping face, wondering if I had the strength to keep going. But every time doubt crept in, I remembered their laughter, the sound of my mother mocking me, the coldness in Brandon's voice when he called me pathetic. And I rose again, stronger than before. The turning point came one Saturday morning when Brandon announced he was running errands. I watched him leave, then waited a few minutes before grabbing my keys. I followed him, my heart pounding with every mile. He drove straight to her house, my mother's house. I parked a few houses down, hands gripping the steering wheel, until my knuckles ached. Through the curtains I saw them. Him handing her a small box. Her face lighting up as she opened it. The necklace. She leaned forward, pressing her lips against his. My stomach twisted, but I didn't cry. Not anymore. Instead, I lifted my phone and snapped photo after photo. Evidence. Truth. Justice in pixels. When I drove away, the sun was setting, painting the sky in streaks of red. It felt like the earth itself was bleeding with me. But under the grief, under the rage, there was something else. A steady, quiet certainty. The woman they thought was weak had just become the woman who would destroy them. The photos burned in my pocket like embers waiting to ignite. I drove home with the windows cracked, the wind stinging my eyes, though it wasn't the breeze that made them wet. By the time I pulled into the driveway, night had fallen, and Tyler's shadow danced in the window as he played with his action figures. His innocence was the only thing keeping me from unraveling completely. I tucked him into bed, listened as he told me about his day at school, the funny thing his teacher had said, the game he and his friends had made up at recess. I smiled, kissed his forehead, and whispered goodnight, my voice steady, only because I had learned how to cage the storm inside me. When I closed his door, I stood there in the dark hallway, one hand pressed to my chest as if I could hold my heart in place before it shattered again. Brandon came home late, smelling faintly of my mother's perfume again. He slipped into bed without a word, his arm draped across me like a claim. I lay stiff and silent until his breathing deepened into sleep. Then I slid out from under him and pulled the photos from my bag. Each image was a dagger. His smile. Her face lit up in adoration. Their kiss. Proof so undeniable it made me sick. I emailed the pictures to Laura that night, along with the audio recordings and bank statements. My message was simple. It's all here now. Every lie, every betrayal. Tell me when to strike. Her reply came at dawn. We move carefully. We let them think you're blind until we have everything lined up. But when we strike, it will be final. The following weeks were an act, a performance in a theater I never auditioned for. Brandon still kissed me goodbye in the mornings, still grumbled about work in the evenings. My mother still called her voice sugary, asking about Tyler, pretending she was still the doting grandmother. I played along. I laughed when they expected it, nodded when they demanded it, folded myself into the role of the broken, fragile woman they thought they controlled. Every smile I gave was a mask, every silence a sharpened blade. But inside I was counting down. One night, Brandon dropped his guard. We were sitting at dinner when his phone buzzed and he excused himself with a smirk. He didn't realize I had installed a keylogger on our shared computer. Later, after he fell asleep, I accessed his synced messages. And there it was, an entire conversation thread with my mother. Explicit, cruel mocking. plans of a future together once the money was theirs. My mother had written she'll crumble Brandon. She always does. I saved every word. The next morning I looked at myself in the mirror. 32 years old, but I felt like I had aged decades. Yet something in my reflection was different now. My eyes were sharper, my shoulders straighter. I didn't see weakness anymore. I saw steel. It was time. I met Laura again, sliding the evidence across her desk. She scanned through it, her brows knitting tighter with every page. When she finally looked up, her gaze was unwavering. "We have everything we need. We'll file for divorce, custody, financial protection. We'll expose the affair if we need to. You'll come out of this with your son and your future intact." For the first time, I let out a shaky laugh that bordered on sobbing. They thought I wouldn't fight. They thought I couldn't. Her eyes softened. That's their mistake, and their downfall. The night before we filed, I sat in Tyler's room watching him sleep. His little chest rose and fell, his mouth parted in the innocence of dreams. I brushed his hair back and whispered a promise only he could hear. "You'll never have to see me weak again. I'll protect you no matter what it costs." The next morning, I walked into the courthouse with my head high, the folder of evidence in my hands, and Laura by my side. Brandon and my mother didn't know it yet, but their game was over. And this time, the silence they had always expected from me would be the silence of their world collapsing. The courthouse smelled faintly of old wood and paper, a mixture of history and judgment. My heels clicked against the floor as I walked down the long hallway, clutching the folder like it was both shield and weapon. Laura walked beside me, calm and steady, her presence grounding me as the storm inside surged. We filed the papers that morning: divorce, custody, financial restraining orders, injunctions. Each document felt like another stone removed from my chest. My hand trembled as I signed my name, but the trembling wasn't fear anymore. It was release. When I walked out into the bright daylight, I felt taller, as though the very air around me recognized the shift. I wasn't the woman who had pressed her ear against her mother's window and nearly collapsed at the sound of their laughter. I was someone new, someone who had clawed her way out of betrayal's grave. Brandon found out 2 days later when he came home to an empty closet where his suits used to hang locks that no longer fit his keys, and a legal notice taped neatly to the door. His voice thundered through the house as he pounded on the door, shouting my name, demanding answers. Tyler stood by my side in the living room, his hand gripping mine. His eyes were wide, but he didn't cry. I bent down and whispered, "We're safe. He can't get in." Eventually, Brandon's rage turned to silence, and his footsteps retreated down the porch. The notice on the door fluttered in the wind like a flag of war. My mother came next. She called incessantly, her voice turning from pleading to threatening to sobbing. I let every call go to voicemail, every message pile up like ashes of the bridge she had burned. Once she showed up at my workplace, her face drawn, her eyes frantic. She tried to corner me in the parking lot, grabbing my arm. "You can't do this to me, Celeste. I'm your mother." I pulled free, my voice steady though my heart hammered. "You stopped being my mother the moment you chose him over me." Her face crumpled, but I didn't waver. I walked away, leaving her standing there in the cold, clutching her coat as though it could shield her from the consequences of her choices. The court battle was long and brutal, but Laura was relentless, and so was I. The evidence, photos, recordings, bank statements, messages spoke louder than any lies Brandon tried to weave. He looked small in that courtroom, his confidence cracking with every exhibit laid before the judge. My mother didn't dare testify, knowing the proof would bury her too. When the custody decision came down in my favor, I sat in that wooden chair and wept, not from weakness, but from relief. Tyler would be with me, safe, away from the poison of betrayal. That night I told him, "It's just us now, kiddo, but we'll be okay." He hugged me tightly, whispering, "I never doubted you, Mom." His faith in me stitched together pieces of my heart I thought were lost forever. Months passed, and the dust began to settle. The whispers faded, the scandal lost its shine in the eyes of the curious. But for me, the lessons etched themselves deep. I learned that betrayal doesn't just wound, it awakens. It strips you bare until you see yourself clearly, until you realize what you will no longer tolerate, who you will no longer become. One evening, as the sun dipped low and Tyler did his homework at the kitchen table, I stood at the window and thought of that day when everything unraveled. The sight of Brandon's car at my mother's gate, the words I overheard, the way my world collapsed in a single breath. And then I thought of the freedom in my chest, the strength in my spine, the quiet power in my voice. Betrayal had broken me, yes, but it had also remade me. I turned back to Tyler, who looked up with a grin, pencil smudges on his cheek. "What's for dinner, Mom?" I smiled, a real smile this time. "Whatever we want, sweetheart. Whatever we want." If this story touched your heart, if you've ever faced betrayal and found the strength to rise again, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe for more stories of resilience and truth. And tell me in the comments what moment in your life turned your pain into power. Your story might inspire someone still fighting in the dark.